Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon what time of the day it is that you're actually watching this online seminar. What this is the online forum to discuss the Town of Windermere Charter Referendum, which will be held on March 14th of 2017. Most of you did receive this pamphlet in the mail, which tells you exactly what the charter amendments are. A lot of you have had a lot of questions because there's a lot of legalese in this, and the purpose of this presentation is to go through those and hopefully answer a lot of your questions and to go through some of the questions I've already had since this mail out was sent out, and also because people have asked questions of their friends, neighbors, and family members. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm hoping to answer those questions, and again, you'll have the opportunity before March 14, 2017 to actually reach out to me, and I'll hopefully be able to answer all of your questions. Again, I'm Robert Smith. I'm the town manager for the town of Windermere. I have been for the last 5.5 years, and let's get started. First question I always get is, what is a town charter? You know, you have, people ask you questions, well, does a town charter include planning, zoning? Does a town charter include speeding tickets? Does it include where I can park my boat trailer? And the answer to that question is no. The town charter is just like your constitution, just like the U.S. Constitution. And like the U.S. Constitution, the state you live in, and the state that you live in, your town has a constitution, although it's called charter. This document defines how your town is organized, how it functions, and all related procedures. Charters are granted by a higher authority, generally the state legislator, or by a referendum passed by eligible voters. Now, what your town charter specifically does is the municipal charter establishes the particular town and includes its boundaries. The charter also includes the municipality's form of government, elected and administrative officials, and municipal elections. It outlines the handling of public services and deals with financial matters such as the powers to tax and to incur debt and bond. The charter contains information regarding the town's boards, commissions, and committees. It addresses charter amendments and other issues dealing with how a municipality operates. Now, the question that I always get is, okay, so what is the difference between a town charter and your land development code and the ordinances? Again, your town charter is just the skeleton of your town government. It tells you how your government is going to function, how many council members do you have, what your fiscal year is going to be, so on and so forth. Just the bare bones, just like you find in the U.S. Constitution. The stuff that has to do with planning and zoning, that's going to be in your comp plan amendment, which is different from your charter. So nothing in your charter is going to, and anything that you vote on today is going to have an impact on land uses or zonings. And the same thing has to do with the Code of Ordinances. The fact that you can't park your boat in the front of your house, that would be in the Code of Ordinances. And the Land Development Code would cover such things as how far you can be from a setback. That, again, has nothing to do with your town charter. And a lot of people ask the question of, why now? Why are we doing this when we had an election back in March of last year relative to the town facilities? This is a way to circumvent that entire process, and the question is, or the answer is, no. The reason that we're doing this is because we are required by our charter to do this every 7 years, to look at our charter and see if revisions are necessary. So just like this next slide indicates, the current town charter was adopted by the town and approved by the voters in 1970. It subsequently has been amended numerous times, subject to voter approval. Under Section 67 of the town charter, the town council may appoint a charter review committee. And the way I'll be referring to this committee would be the CRC, at least every 10 years for the purpose of proposing needed amendments and revisions. So that 7 years was coming up because the last charter revision was done in 2007. So again, this process should have started a long time ago. But the council on June 9th went ahead and selected 5 town residents to serve as the CRC. And they spent about 6 months working on this charter, sometimes twice a week, going through every line and going through every word, trying to see what can be changed, what should be changed, and what shouldn't be changed. And what they came up with was 2 big recommendations. Number 1, they wanted to delete numerous provisions rendered unnecessary or ineffective by municipal home rule powers and other Florida law. The meaning of this is that a lot of the stuff in our current charter, which is actually 50 pages long, if you look at Winter Garden and Coe, theirs are about 17 pages long. So they wanted to reduce what was already duplicated in Florida statute, which we cannot violate. So that reduced our current existing charter significantly. So that's one of the things they wanted to do, was to eliminate that stuff that was already covered under Florida state statute. They also wanted to update the style of the charter and to revise or eliminate archaic wording. There was also some things that were in certain sections that didn't make sense and had to be moved into the sections that made sense. There was stuff that was in the borrowing section that actually had to deal with elections or term limits. So we made sure that when we looked at this, it was in a format in a way that was easy to read and took out that archaic wording that is no longer necessary. So in its draft of the revised charter, the CRC is proposing no material change. I repeat, no material change in this first question that's going to be proposed to you on the 14th. It's not changing the council manager form of government. It is not changing the duties and powers of the town. It is not changing how we do town elections. It's not changing the town officers and elected officials or any part of the town government. Instead, the proposed revisions updates, modernizes, and shortens the charter, and the CRC believes that this makes the charter easier to read. So back, when we had the meeting with the Charter Review Committee, the Town Council reviewed and discussed extensively the proposed revisions of the Town Charter, and consequently, it's ready and willing to offer to the town voters for approval at the town's general election in March 14th of 2017, this question that'll be on the ballot. And this question is, again, the overall redraft of the town charter itself. It has nothing to do with the borrowing. It's just taking out that archaic wording, the stuff that's already covered in state statutes, and it's reducing your town charter from 50 pages to about 20 pages. But it's not fundamentally changing the way you operate, the way you, tax, anything like that. It is, again, just modernizing that document. So the question that's going to be proposed to you, the first question that will be proposed to you on that ballot on March 14th, will read as such. Shall there be a new town charter for the town of Windermere that rewrites the current charter adopted in 1970 by effectively removing the current charter numerous obsolete or unnecessary provisions, removing provisions covered by state law, and revising archaic wording, but that makes no material change to the town council manager form of government, to the town officers and elected officials, or to town elections, governing procedures, and duties and powers. So if you vote yes on this section, then you're voting yes to amend that charter to accomplish those goals. If you vote no, then what will remain is the existing charter that's about 50 pages long. So that's going to be the first question that's going to be asked of you on March 14, 2017. The next section is actually specific to a current section in your charter that you have right now. And that's section 49, which deals with town borrowing. And that was one of the issues that CRC brought up and town council as far as the current restrictions and the current legal memorandums relating to the 12.5% that is in section 49. So it is the judgment of the town council that since its approval some 10 years ago, the borrowing limitation in section 49 of the charter has proven itself to impede the ability of the town to serve its residents and taxpayers timely and properly. And we'll get into that a little bit. As an example, capital improvements such as road and drainage projects the town council believes are necessary or desirable for the town residents can often be undertaken without tax increases, even if the project must be financed with a loan or other borrowing. However, section 49 borrowing limitation can be a barrier, in the view of town council, to undertaking and completing needed project in a timely and proper manner. Town council recognizes and respects the town's or the citizens' mandate that the town exercise fiscal responsibility. Town council also believes that voters should be offered the opportunity to decide whether to modify the section 49 limitation in a way that town council believes will allow for greater functionality and flexibility in town projects without sacrificing fiscal responsibility. Now, when this question was proposed back in 2007, unlike the charter question that you have today, with an overriding charter revision and then a material change that's specifically taken out, like we are right now, the 2000 ballot question that created this 12.5% project cap was worded as such. Shall the charter be amended to require a balanced budget, which Florida statute requires, set October 1st as the beginning of the fiscal year, which it already was, to establish procedures for supplemental appropriations, which you already have the power to do so, to provide for and levy taxes, which again, since 1970, you have the power to do so. Assessments and fees is permitted by law. It's permitted by law, so again, that was already a power that you had. To require an annual independent audit, Florida state statute requires that. and to restrict non-emergency debt beyond 12.5% of the general operating budget. So as you can see, there was a lot of language in there that had nothing to do with the 12.5% cap. At that time, council decided to go ahead and move forward with this. It was approved, and that 12.5% project cap was established at that time. And we're going to go over the reasoning of why town council wants or is looking to change that with option 1 or option 2. So currently, the town charter reads as follows as relative to section 49. The town shall incur no non-emergency debt beyond 12.5% of the general operating budget unless the occurrence of such debt is approved by the majority vote of the citizens. Now, the legal opinion that we received, because when some people read that 12.5%, they think, okay, well, I'll just, multiply 12.5% by the 4.8 million that you have right now, and you can't go over that threshold. You can't go over that cap. That is not the case. This section means that if any project is over 12.5% of your overall budget, it would have to go to the voters. But the town can incur as much debt as it wants to, as long as it doesn't go over that cap. And as the section reads, this means that if the debt for a project would be to exceed 12.5% of the overall budget, either the town voters would need to approve that project or the debt cannot be incurred. The current fiscal year of 2016-2017 operating budget is $4.8 million. Under Section 49, if a project would cause a town debt to exceed 12.5%, which is $603,000, that project would need to be approved by the town voters via special election, or would have to wait till the next election cycle before the project could be started. One example is if the project to repave Main Street requiring the town to borrow $625,000 or more, it would first require the expense and perhaps the delay of a referendum before a project would be undertaken. So again, the fiscal year budget is $4.8 million. $603,000 of that is 12.5%. There's currently no cap on that. Questions that I have right now are, how much does this really cost the voters as far as, monetarily, if we were to make sure that there was a vote on any project that was over that $600,000? And the typical answer is about $4,000. But again, it depends on the complexity of the issue at hand. The issue that's in front of you today is very complex. It's not only taking a lot of time and money to do this, but again, with time, it's the sweat equity of staff in order to explain it to you, so it's in a manner that you'll be able to comprehend, that you'll be able to have an intelligent conversation with your friends, your neighbors, and families on what exactly you're voting for, as opposed to reading an ordinance or reading a charter amendment and not fully understanding what it is. Typically, again, that costs $4,000, not including legal fees, but it also creates a delay in time. For us to adequately get a referendum together, we have to submit stuff to the supervisor election about 3 to 4 months ahead of time. So let's just say that we wanted to go ahead and get a project done in the summertime. We wouldn't be able to do that because we would have to, that exceeded that $600,000. We wouldn't be able to do that because of the constraints that we currently have. One of the questions that we had at one of the workshops was, what about grants, matching grants that are offered to the town? A lot of times, smaller municipalities, yes, we are Windermere, but again, our overall budget is $4.8 million, and a lot of the capital improvement projects that we have planned exceed that $600,000, whether it be utilities, whether it be roads, whether it be town facilities, so on and so forth. There's other monies out there that we can try to get, but a lot of those require matching funds, either from the federal government or the state government. And a lot of those are very time sensitive. So if there's an opportunity for us to get a water line system in the town, but required a amount of money in matching funds that exceeded that $600,000, the town would be at a loss because we might miss out on that grant because we would have to go ahead and had that referendum to come up with that matching funds, as opposed to grabbing those matching funds in order to get the double of your money and able to do twice the amount of project for the money that you would have had in the first place. So that was one of the questions that was asked at one of the workshops that we had. But again, what this does is, and this next slide demonstrates, in the orange, that shows you the $4.8 million that we currently have in our budget. The 12.5% cap is indicated in red, so that's the $600,000. The existing debt that the town has currently is about $270,000. That's 5.6% of your overall budget. And the majority of that is $217,000, which is the funding for the Main Street roundabout improvements. We have about maybe 10 years left on that loan before it's paid off. The downfall of the 12.5% cap per project, not only is it seen to handcuff the town as far as getting projects approved in a timely manner, but it also doesn't have a cap on how much aggregate debt that you can incur into the town over a period of time. So, in the way that I can explain that is, as long as the town stays underneath that $600,000, I could take out $400,000 or $500,000 loans for 4 different projects and get you $2 million in debt service as long as I stay underneath that $600,000. So the example I provided in front of you shows like a $2.5 million debt service. That's a debt service that you'd have carried forward into future budgets. That doesn't have a cap. The only cap that you have is that $600,000 cap per project. So what the town council did was they decided to go ahead and give the voters some options. There's questions as far as fiscal responsibility. What also was might have seemed like a high number in 2007 is no longer a high number because of the fact that the CPI has increased, construction costs have increased significantly. So $600,000 doesn't get you what you got in 2007. So they looked at, again, 2 options. One, they wanted to give you an option as far as creating a cap every single year as far as your debt service that you can carry over, or increasing that project-specific referendum to $1.4 million. So if there was that project that needed matching funds of $1.4 million or less, they'd have the ability to go ahead and jump on that and hopefully apply for that grant. But what the first revision, option 1, gives you is that 10% cap. And I'll read the section, then we'll go through in detail what that actually means. Shall Section 49 of the Windermere Charter be revised to strike the prohibition against aggregate debt exceeding 12.5% of the current operating budget without voter approval and allow new debt if either the resulting aggregate annual debt payments in any fiscal year will not exceed 10% of the current operating budget, or 2, or B, the voters' approve the new debt. A no vote means the existing 12.5% debt limit remains in the charter. What this actually means is that this revision would allow the town to incur debt in an aggregate amount only up to the point the town's total annual budget debt service payment equal 10% of the current annual operating budget. So right now your budget's at $4.8 million, it'd be $480,000. If next year it's at $500,000, your borrowing limitation of that 10% would be $500,000. The current fiscal year, 16-17, again, is $4.8 million. If this revision is approved, the town will have the ability to incur new debt only up to that point. The town's aggregate debt does not require total principal and interest payments in any single year to exceed that 10%, which would be $483,000. Town council believes that the approval of this revision would allow more flexibility in making fiscal and budgetary decisions and managing town facilities, services, and activities properly. If this proposal amendment is denied by the voters and the below option, which is option 2 amendment, is likewise defeated, the existing 12.5% of the budget borrowing limitation remains. This is the only option that creates that cap for your annual debt. Again, your annual debt service is what your mortgage is, what your car payment would be if you're relating to your personal finances. So as much revenue as you take in per year or per month, you would not be able to exceed that 10% for those payments, for those items, without going to a charter amendment or charter referendum. So it gives you that comfort level that the town's not going to get into debt service to where you're going to get in trouble. So that's why one of the options for the town to consider gives you that 10% cap. And just for reference too, as far as a cap on projects or cap on debt service, a lot of other jurisdictions do not have this cap. A lot of jurisdictions just require that they have a balanced budget, and they do what they need to do in order to get their capital improvements programs funded and completed. We're an anomaly in this situation to where we require the vote of the $600,000, in order for us to fund a project. not sure about the reasoning behind when it was originally put into place, but again, it is something that is not standard in any government that is around our jurisdiction. But this option does give you the comfort level of that. We will not go over that 10% cap. The second option that's going to be proposed to you doesn't create a cap, but it increases that $600,000 per project voting initiative to $1.4 million, which is 30% of your overall $4.8 million budget. And this option is going to read as such. If and only if voters disapprove the previous question, shall Section 49 of the Charter be amended to strike the prohibition against aggregate debt exceeding 12.5% of the current operating budget without voter approval, and 2, allow new debt for a capital project. If the debt either does not exceed 30% of the current operating budget, or if first approved by voters, a no vote means that debt limit of the 12.5% remains in the Charter. So again, what this means is that with the revision, we would not be able to fund a project that exceeds 30% of your general budget, 30% of your revenues. You wouldn't be able to go ahead and do a project, which that would be equal to $1.4 million. Again, this was trying to get more flexibility as far as a project, so the town will be able to fund more projects. But again, this does not set a cap like option 1. So the town would have the ability to incur as much debt as long as they have a balanced budget at the end of the year. So with the option 2, and the slide that you have in front of you shows you, okay, on the $4.8 million, which is the orange, the $1.4 million is in red. So it shows you what that is in comparison to your overall budget. Again, the existing debt is 5.6%. Both with the existing 12.5% and option 2, there's no cap. So at your 5.6% current existing debt you have right now, that can balloon up to 10%, 12%, 30%, 40%. What I have in here as an example is $2.5 million, which again would probably be about 50% of what your overall budget will be next year. So there's no cap, but you would have the ability to vote for any project that is over $1.4 million. So again, the differences between option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is aggregate debt based. It's not project specific. And again, what I mean by annual debt service, if you'd see like, for your own personal finances, it's your mortgage, it's your car payment, it's your home equity lines. Anything that is loan based, you wouldn't be able to have that debt service over that 10%. So, if I buy a fleet of cars for the public works or, the police department, if I have road projects that I need to take loans out, it can never exceed that 10%. Option 2 is different than option 1. And option 2 is just like or the current existing charter to where it is project specific. So it just increases that 12.5% to 30%. So instead of the $600,000, you're looking at $1.4 million, and there's no cap on aggregate debt per year. So a quick comparison again, if you look on this slide, the orange is the $4.8 million. The 12.5% cap for, or not cap, but project specific is indicated in red. The 10% option 1 actually is a cap, and that's shown in the gray. And the 30% option 2, which is no cap, shows the increase of what $0.4 million would look like in comparison to your overall budget. But again, with the cap versus the no cap, the orange shows you that the $4.8 million is what we have today in our operating budget. The 12.5% current no cap, again, if I wanted to take out loans for capital improvement projects that are less than $600,000, I can do so right now. And I can take out 4 of them. And then your overall debt service is getting up there. And again, as I indicated, I put in there about $2.5 million. And the same thing with the 30%. There's no cap, so you can aggregate that debt as much as you want, from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40%. The only option that gives you that cap is indicated in the gray, is that 10%. So the voter options that you're going to have. Again, it's going to seem a little confusing, and hopefully our discussion today is going to help get you through those muddy waters. If the option 1, receives more than 51% of the vote, that's it. That's now part of your charter. That 10% cap is now in the charter amendment. If it doesn't receive more than 50% of the vote, then the 12.5% stays, unless option 2 receives 51% of the vote. If option 1 fails and option 2 succeeds, then again, option 2 will now become a part of your charter. If both fail, then the remaining 12.5% stays within the charter, which is that 12.5% cap. In the next slide, I'll show you a flow chart, and hopefully, again, we'll answer some of the questions that you have relative to if I vote yes on both or if I vote no on both, what will be the repercussions. If option 1, which is the 10% overall debt cap, receives over 50% of the votes, then it becomes part of your charter. That's it. It stops right there. If option 1 doesn't receive over 50% of the vote, then 12.5% project cap remains unless the option 2 receives over 50% of the vote. If option 2 receives over 50% of the vote and option 1 doesn't, then option 2, which is the 30% cap, then becomes part of the charter. If option 1, which is the 10%, receives over 50% of the vote as well as option 2 receives over 50% of the vote, it doesn't matter how much over that 50% it is, option 1, it would be now part of your charter. And the way that is explained is if you voted no on option 1 and yes on option 2, if option 1 has over 50% of the voter approval and option 2 has 80% of the voter approval, option 1 would go into your charter because it's the first option that's proposed to the electorate. If neither of them get over 50%, then the 12.5% cap remains. Again, today's date is February 15, 2017. We've already held our first public hearing on February 13th. We're going to be holding 2 more on February 20th and also on March 6th, which is about 1 week prior to the election date. They'll both be held in Town Hall from 6 to 8 p.m., and I'll be here to answer any questions that you may have relative to the charter questions themselves. If you want me to speak at any HOA, any civic organization, religious group, or if you just have some questions you want to give me a call, my contact information is on this slide. Please feel free to contact me because I want the voters to be informed and make their decisions based on fact, not on fiction. Not based on hearsay, but straight from the horse's mouth of why we're doing this, what the impacts are going to be, and what the future of the town may look like with the selection of any of the options. So again, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for getting through this online seminar with me, and hopefully I've answered your questions. If not, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Thank you again, and get out and vote on March 14th.